Young Thorfinn grew up with wild dreams of Vinland, a legendary paradise across the ocean, all warm and lush, miles away from his freezing Icelandic hellhole and the military grind. His life's been a bloody mess of war. His old man said, "You've got no enemies, nobody does. It's never okay to hurt anyone." But Thorfinn learned that life's a brutal joke. The war between England and the Danes just keeps going off the rails. Death's a constant party, and Viking mercenaries are living it up in the chaos. Who the Vikings throw their lot in with could totally flip the power game, and they're grabbing everything they can. In this godforsaken mess, Thorfinn's on a rampage for revenge against Askalon, the bastard who butchered his dad. For the Vikings, paradise is just a sick joke. War and death are their only damn constants. The story kicked off with four feared Vikings tearing through the battlefield like a TikTok trend, unstoppable and chaotic. Torkel, Thor's ride or die, threw him a heads up to stay sharp. Thor's slicing through foes and dodging arrows like he was dodging spoilers, leapt onto nearby ships, taking out everyone in his path. Just when he was vibing in the thick of it, a dying enemy's desperate cry for his wife threw Thor's off his game. He got hit by a few arrows, like totally not cool, but quickly hit back, sending his attacker and himself into the sea like an epic fail compilation. Disgusted by the pointless carnage, Thor swam to shore and swore he'd never lift a sword again. Now, Thor settled into a quiet life in an Icelandic village with his wife, Helga, daughter, Ylva, and son, Thorfinn. He's put his warrior days behind him. One night, while kids gathered around listening to Leif's tales of warm lands, Thor and Leif chatted about getting ready for the winter, while Ylva looked after some weak sheep. The next morning, Ylva found a shivering, frail man buried in the snow. Despite her doubts, Thor decided to revive him. The man was an escaped slave from Halfdan's cruel hands, and he laid out his grim story. Ylva was scared about keeping him, but Thor pushed for the full scoop. Just then, a villager warned that Halfdan was marching in with a platoon. At the docks, Halfdan confronted Leif, demanding his escaped property back. A young Viking tries to step up, but ended up disarmed and mutilated by Halfdan, who was showing he meant business. The villagers, shaken, let Halfdan have his way. Halfdan demanded the return of the slave. Thors asked how much, and Halfdan coldly said, 2 sheep. Thors upped the offer to 3, but Halfdan insisted on punishing the slave. Thors, undeterred, stood tall and offered 4 young sheep instead. Halfdan pushed for 8, and Thors agreed. Satisfied, Halfdan left. The slave died a few hours later. At the funeral, Ylva criticized Thors for paying so much for a dead slave, but Thors, unfazed, mourned quietly before heading home. The next day, while Thor was attempting to fix a pot, because even gods need to DIY, Thorfinn rolled up like a human notification alert, shouting about a warship. He said he and Leif had spotted a giant warship in the village, and Leif had sent him to find Thors. Thors headed to the docks, where a crowd was gawking at a longship filled with Vikings in fancy armor like they were gearing up for a medieval fashion show. The leader, named Floki, bowed to Thors and called him their leader. The villagers were shook, but Thors stayed chill and asked Floki what he wanted. Floki asked to speak with Thors privately, so they went to Thors' home while the Vikings watched the village. Floki explained that the English had killed the king's sister-in-law, prompting the king to prepare a large invasion. He wanted Thors to return to the army despite his past desertion and threatened the village if Thor refused. Thor, having left that life behind, was reluctant, but Floki's threat forced his agreement. At the docks, Floki announced that they were going to war with England and Thors would lead them. He invited the villagers to join, and they eagerly accepted, but Thors was troubled and went home. Leif visited Thors, concerned that the villagers who had never seen war and had a romanticized view and would likely suffer. Despite his warnings, the villagers remained enthusiastic. The next day, they prepared the warship for departure. Thorfinn played war games with other kids, aggressively breaking one child's bone. The injured child's father brought him to Thors, who mended the hand, while the other kids complained about Thorfinn's rough play. At home, Thors found Thorfinn with his old dagger, and he took it away and scolded him for fighting needlessly. Thorfinn runs outside as Thors watched him go. The next day, they prepared to leave. Thors took only 5 men with him. A worried woman asked Leif if they'd be safe. Leif explained that Thors was heading alone into battle after dropping the 5 men in Norway, as the ship could only manage that many for the return trip. Disappointed girl left as Thor searched for Thorfinn, who was missing. Torres asked his wife to watch Thorfinn while he was away. He took a massive oar and began rowing while the 5 men rowed on one side. Torres generated more power than the men combined. They sailed him into favorable winds, allowing them to rest. Torres set up the mast as the tired men lay on the deck. He reassured the man that the wind would guide them. At that moment, Thorfinn emerged from a barrel, surprising everyone, including Torres. Torres spanked him but then let him sleep on his lap. Torres and another man kept watch while the others slept. At dawn, Leif announced they were nearing an island. As they entered a cove, Leif sensed danger. Torres agreed to back off, but debris began falling from above. Torres shielded Thorfinn while the others took cover. When the debris finally settled, their exit was blocked like a bad Wi-Fi connection. Leif confirmed everyone was unharmed, and Torres dropped the incoming enemy's alert. 2 warships appeared, causing instant panic like everyone just saw a surprise quiz. Torres armed himself and handed Thorfinn a dagger, advising him to use it only if absolutely necessary, like don't call me unless it's a real emergency. Tor then leapt onto one of the enemy ships, taking down attackers with ease, leaving the crew stunned like they just seen a viral TikTok dance. Tor faced a group of attackers without needing a sword, effortlessly knocking them out with his fists as he advanced towards the vice commander. Despite axes and swords being swung at him, he broke arms, struck faces, and tossed his enemies into the water, even throwing an oar to ensure they wouldn't drown. Meanwhile, Bjorn, under the influence of drugs, went berserk, attacking his own crew and damaging the ship and causing his men to panic and jump overboard. Torres calmly subdued Bjorn with a punch and an uppercut, ending the chaos. Torres then threw Bjorn onto the enemy ship, causing significant damage and halting the invasion. Facing 30 men and archers, Torres challenged their leader Askeladd to a duel, offering the lives of his men if Askeladd won, but demanding a retreat if he lost. Askeladd, who had been hired by Floki to kill Torres, accepted. Using a sail to obscure Torres' vision, Askeladd managed to scratch, but Torres quickly overpowered him, breaking his sword and winning the duel. Despite Torres' victory and his demand for a retreat, Askeladd refused to hit the surrender button and challenged Torres to kill him. However, Torres quipped that a true warrior doesn't need a sword. Askeladd, impressed by the assertion, joked about offering leadership but ultimately hit the cancel button on that idea. The situation escalated when Bjorn, a plot twist no one saw coming, revived and took Thorfinn hostage. To protect his son, Torres pulled a major sacrifice move, commanding his men to shoot him with arrows. Despite his injuries, Torres' bold actions forced Bjorn to release Thorfinn. Moved by Torres' bravery, Askeladd decided to peace out, withdrawing his troops and leaving Thorfinn to vow revenge on the return journey. Thorfinn, stranded for days without food or water, clung to life with his burning desire for revenge. His last drink of salty water barely sustained him. When Askeladd and his crew landed on an island to loot, Thorfinn, weak and exhausted, collapsed as he reached land. That night, he discovered Askeladd's men attacking and killing villagers. After they fell asleep, Thorfinn snuck into their camp and found Askeladd asleep and almost killed him. However, he hesitated and ultimately left. The next morning, Thorfinn challenged Askeladd to a duel. Seeing Thorfinn struggle with an oversized sword, Askeladd agreed to fight but wanted him to attack. Thorfinn charged, got his sword stuck, and was easily kicked aside. Askeladd taunted him, saying he should have killed him while he was asleep. Starving, Thorfinn watched Askeladd's men feast. A soldier threw him an empty bone, which Thorfinn refused, and he ran into the forest. He failed to catch a rabbit but found bitter nuts to eat. That evening, Thorfinn returned to the camp and collapsed next to his stolen sword. Bjorn, surprised that Thorfinn was still alive, asked if he had used the sword. Thorfinn accused Bjorn of cheating and attacked, but Bjorn blocked his strikes and walked away. During the night, Thorfinn faced a wolf. Switching to his lighter dagger, he killed it and gained confidence. He practiced knife throwing and finally caught a rabbit, enjoying a meal. The next day, Thorfinn challenged Askeladd again. Askeladd accepted, and Thorfinn attacked, but was easily dodged and kicked repeatedly. Askeladd defeated Thorfinn's thrown dagger and told him to earn glory before challenging him again. Thorfinn, eager for glory and a duel with Askeladd, joined the Viking invasion of England. Askeladd, also seeking glory and gold, took part in the battle. After they had sailed up a river and docked, they found dead bodies on the shore. While the experienced Vikings walked through the corpses with ease, Thorfinn struggled and ended up vomiting from the gruesome sight. night. He followed them and foraged for walnuts as night fell. Askeladd had made a deal with a Viking army to cash in as a mercenary. During a fierce battle triggered by an English ambush, Thorfinn, who was initially more scared than a cat in a bath, was saved by Askeladd. He quickly leveled up his combat skills, even saving Askeladd's life and slaying enemies with his dagger like he was on a gaming spree. Now older and seasoned, Thorfinn was sent by Askeladd to scout the enemy, but found himself surrounded by soldiers and dogs. Classic when you think you're alone and then realize you're in a horror movie situation. He took down several but ended up wounded and collapsed near a river. An old woman and her daughter found him and took care of him. The woman revealed that she once had a son Thorfinn's age who had tragically kicked the bucket from a fever, because life's cruel and doesn't always hit pause. When an English soldier came looking for Thorfinn, the woman lied and said Thorfinn was her son. Thorfinn then set a hut on fire to signal Askeladd. During the chaos, he killed several soldiers and warned the old woman to run as the Vikings invaded and destroyed the village. Winter was arriving and Askeladd was determined to gather gold before the snow made fighting difficult. With the England campaign suspended, he turned his attention to France, where the besieging commander was struggling to capture the castle. Askeladd devised a plan to steal the treasure by helping the besiegers take the castle, and his men agreed enthusiastically. Askeladd sent Thorfinn, a fierce and skilled teenager with daggers, to propose the deal to the Red Army commander: support them for half the gold or face total destruction. Thorfinn, frustrated and seeking revenge, demanded a duel. Askeladd agreed to the duel if Thorfinn returned with the head of a commander. Thorfinn then went to camp. At sunset, Thorfinn forced his way to the commander, who reluctantly agreed to the deal. Thorfinn signaled with blazing fire arrows. The next morning, the Red Army charged, but was mercilessly cut down by the Blue Army's crossbows. Thorfinn identified the Blue Army general and rushed towards the castle. Vikings emerged from the trees, launched longships into the river, and struck from behind while the defenders were distracted. Thorfinn climbed the wall and engaged in fierce combat. Askeladd landed, and with swift precision, Thorfinn killed the general and retrieved his head. Askeladd's army then overran the Red Army, plundering all the gold. Thorfinn presented the general's head to Askeladd, who agreed to the duel on solid ground. They then returned to their prosperous village. As the longboats docked, villagers gathered to welcome the victorious heroes and their treasures. Thorfinn walked the crowd and bumped into a young man who quickly stepped back after seeing Thorfinn's threatening look. Askeladd talked about the treasures and asked the village chief to watch the upcoming duel. In the duel, the crowd was surprised to see Thorfinn, a small boy, challenge the undefeated Askeladd. Bjorn watched closely, knowing Thorfinn had become stronger. Askeladd tries to distract Thorfinn by asking about his age and height, but Thorfinn stayed silent. Askeladd revealed how much smaller Thorfinn used to be, which prompted Thorfinn to attack his neck. Askeladd dodged. Thorfinn kept attacking while Askeladd defended. Askeladd countered with a strong blow, pushing Thorfinn back. Thorfinn blocked his attack with a dagger and tried to hit Askeladd's fingers. To avoid the strike, Askeladd let go of his sword, and Thorfinn stepped back to let him pick it up again. Askeladd mocked Thorfinn, saying he must have had a weak father. This enraged Thorfinn, who then executed a powerful slash just as Askeladd had hoped. Askeladd countered Thorfinn's attack, threw him to the ground, and dislocated his shoulder to win. He told Thorfinn that he still had a lot to learn. That evening, while everyone else celebrated, Thorfinn stayed on his father's boat, finding comfort despite the cold. A slave girl sent by Askeladd arrived with the food. Upset by her situation, Thorfinn told her he would have killed her owner and escaped if he were in her place. As winter ended, the Vikings marched on Linden and faced Thorkel the Tall. Now fighting for the English, Thorkel easily dismembered Vikings, frightening the army and lowering their morale. Floki, suspecting that Thorkel is collaborating with the English, sailed towards the bridge. As he approached, he was shot by archers. Thorkel soon appeared and greeted him warmly as an old friend. Floki then offered Thorkel a choice: leave the English and rejoin the Vikings for double the pay, or face death. Thorkel responded by arguing that England was weak and that he preferred fighting the stronger Vikings. The Vikings tried to attack the bridge using longships, but Thorkel countered this by using pointed logs to destroy the ships. The English celebrated their apparent victory, believing the battle was won. However, Askeladd and Thorfinn soon arrived on a longship with the intention of killing Thorkel. Despite the ongoing attack, Askeladd skillfully maneuvered the ship close enough for Thorfinn to leap across. Sensing Thorfinn's plan, Torkel ordered his men to stand down and engage Thorfinn in a one-on-one fight. Thorfinn managed to dodge Torkel's attacks and cut his wrist, but he struggled as Torkel unleashed a flurry of rapid punches. Thorfinn feinted a low attack, tripped Torkel, and attempted to stab him. Torkel blocked the attack and retaliated, beating Thorfinn, which led Askeladd to order a retreat. Impressed by Thorfinn's tenacity, Torkel watched as Thorfinn severed the fingers and escaped. Thorfinn then revealed that he was Thor's son, stirring up old memories for Torkel. After diving into the water, Thorfinn swam away. Eventually, he emerged, injured but safe, and rejoined Askeladd's army. The army decided to withdraw and regroup elsewhere. Meanwhile, Thorfinn reflected on his defeat and the events that had transpired. Askeladd and his men were resting in the village trying to decide their next move. In the morning, while Askeladd was talking to Thorfinn, they noticed a rider passing by their camp. Askeladd called for him to stop, and it turned out the rider was from Prince Canut's army. Prince Canute was second in line for the throne of Denmark. The rider explained that he had been left with 4,000 men to capture the London Bridge. However, Torkel, out of boredom, decided to take his 400 men and attack their camp in broad daylight. He used a wooden log to crush anyone who got in his way, killing almost all the troops and capturing Prince Canute. The rider then asked Askeladd for help in gathering men to protect the prince, saying he would seek assistance from the main army as well. In response, Askeladd drew his sword out and, without hesitation, decapitated the messenger, shocking everyone around him. When Bjorn asked what he was doing, Askeladd explains that they would rescue the prince on their own without outside help. He argued that whoever wanted the prince back, whether it was the King of England or the King of Denmark, would be willing to pay a high price. With this decision made, Askeladd rallied his troops to prepare for battle against the mighty Torkel, known as the Tall. Torkel, transporting the captured prince through the forest to provoke the Danish king, suddenly felt like he was being watched. He halted his caravan and threw a spear at a hill, killing a man from Prince Canute's retinue. The soldiers then revealed themselves as Prince Canute's, claiming to be 2,000 strong. However, Torkel remained skeptical of their numbers. Torkel released the prince and threw down the gauntlet, challenging their commander, which sparked a battle hotter than a viral tweet. Ragnar ordered a retreat to protect the prince, but Torkel's taunts were like a red flag to a bull, pushing the men to fight. With his battle axes, Torkel wreaked havoc, clapping down enemies in trees like he was in a lumberjack competition, scaring everyone in sight. Despite Ragnar's warnings about a repeat of the Battle of London Bridge, Torkel found the 400 men against him a walk in the park and kept on attacking. Meanwhile, Askeladd was busy spreading gasoline and setting the forest on fire. Talk about setting the mood for a dramatic finale. Torkel noticed the smoke and saw a massive blaze erupting in the distance, like someone forgot to turn off their barbecue grill. The fire quickly engulfed the battlefield, roasting men and filling the area with thick smoke. Realizing the fire was intentional, Askeladd instructed Thorfinn to rescue the prince because no one messes with the royal squad on his watch. Drenched and mounted on horseback, Thorfinn charged through the flames. He fought off Torkel's soldiers and managed to save the prince, striking down an attacker with a swift blow, which impressed the remaining enemies. Emerging from the smoke, Torkel greeted Thorfinn, showing off severed fingers. He warned them not to underestimate Thorfinn and retreated, vowing to pursue him. Thorfinn returned the prince to Askeladd, who bowed in acknowledgement. Ragnar criticized Askeladd for the reckless use of fire, but ultimately entrusted him with the responsibility of ensuring the prince's safety. Askeladd marched to escape Torkel, who was pursuing him to recapture Prince Canute. Knowing that his smaller forces couldn't win in a direct confrontation, Askeladd asked a fisherman at the riverbank to deliver a message to the Kingdom of Wales. After this, he continued his march. Near a hill, Askeladd's men reported that Torkel was only a day away, causing panic among the troops. The man also spotted fleeing spies, prompting Askeladd to order an immediate march. The wary soldiers, accustomed to sailing rather than marching, pressed on through the rain and mud. At night, only Askeladd stayed awake. Bjorn suggested resting, but Askeladd insisted on continuing. The troops grumbled, with some even falling asleep while walking. Ragnar asked for a plan, but was told to be quiet. Askeladd's group eventually encountered two cloaked men by a stone structure. He thanked them as a warship emerged from the fog, and they made their way into Wales, forming an alliance. The troops, relieved to be away from Torkel, felt safer. Ragnar suggested requesting additional warships, but Askeladd declined, citing Wales's limited resources and opting to march instead. Ragnar remained concerned about Canute's safety. Askeladd assigned Thorfinn as Canute's bodyguard, and Thorfinn agreed to a duel with him later because nothing says trustworthy like the good old face-off. Canute, playing the hide-and-seek champion, hid behind Ragnar. The Welsh commander, mistaking Thorfinn for Canute, roasted Canute's look and asked him to promise not to invade Wales. Canute whispered to Ragnar, but the commander was like, nope, gotta chat with Canute himself before heading off. As they continued their march, the commander dropped the news that a neighboring kingdom was ready to offer support, making everyone's day a little more dramatic. Soon they spotted two cloaked figures. Bjorn, ever the alarmist, warned of a potential trap, and Askeladd hit the brakes. Suddenly, archers ambushed them, hitting Askeladd's horse as if they were aiming for the Equestrian Olympics, but he managed to escape unharmed. Askeladd ordered his troops not to retaliate and demanded to know the intentions of the figures ahead, because he's not about that fight first, ask questions later life.